Welcome to X-Files Podcast, a podcast about breakups, broken hearts, and moving on. I'm Janice Formicella, a breakup coach passionate about supporting others to heal from their breakups, overcome loneliness, love being single, and see the end of a relationship as the beginning of a magical new chapter in life. I am here each week to share with you the tools that I have learned through my own painful breakups, through hitting rock bottom more than once, and through working with people all around the world to heal their broken hearts. If you are looking for hope and strength to move on from your breakup and resources to enjoy your new single life, you are in the right place, and I've got your back. Welcome to another episode of X-Files, dear listeners. I'm so glad that you are here today. I'm so glad that you're here every time that you are here. This is also another episode in my Sexual Health Awareness Month series. In today's episode, I welcome Suze Elzbieta, pronouns she and her, also known as Suze Bub, to talk to X-Files listeners about her mission to destigmatize herpes. It's also a fun episode, as this was the last episode I recorded with former co-host Claire before she stepped down from the show. So I hope everyone enjoys that as a special treat today. Suze will tell her story of being diagnosed with herpes, let us know all about how very common herpes is, tell us her story of being called out on MTV's ridiculousness, and it is ridiculous, and let you all know how you can pitch in to make our society a safer place for people to talk about this very, very widespread virus. Suze is a sensual guide and herpes advocate and can be found on Instagram at Suze Bubs and on TikTok at Suze Bub. I will put that in the show notes. Please go and show her some love, and please do pay close attention to what she says at the end about what we can all do to destigmatize herpes. I know I've already started to change some of the ways I interact with people, and I'm really glad to be a part of this movement. Hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll see you back here on Tuesday. Bye. All right, welcome again to the show, Suze. We're so excited to hear about your story and everything that you're doing. Thanks for being here.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's dive into it. We have so many juicy things to go over. Let's, not waste any time. Claire introduced me to your work and thus our entire audience. So thank you, Claire. And she really liked your work destigmatizing herpes, which I also think is incredibly fascinating and brave. And also, not only do you destigmatize herpes, you also work a lot with, you have a lot of trolls, a few haters. Most recently, perhaps even MTV highlighted you and really roasted your very well-intended work. So I guess it might be good to start out. How did you decide to build a brand around destigmatizing herpes? It is very specific. And I think our audience would love to hear that.
Yeah, sure. So basically, it was never the plan or intention to build a brand around herpes. I never expected it to go that way. When I first got diagnosed, admittedly, as much as it was like a huge hit for me and emotional and scary and depressing, like a lot of people experience, I had this little inkling that it was something I was going to talk about in the future. And I was kind of like annoyed by that nagging little voice inside. Like I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm never going to talk about this publicly, you
Yeah.
know? Um, but it was just something I felt from the beginning for some reason. And I think part of it might have been that as we're often doing research on something that we get, you know, or get exposed to, like we kind of research it more than ever in those situations, you really quickly realize how needlessly stigmatized this is, you know? So I
Yeah.
think as much as I was still going through the motions of processing the diagnosis and going through my feelings around it, I also knew at the same time that this isn't something that we should be going through. Like this isn't a way that people should be suffering over something so common and so menial, you know? So I think I kind of just knew at the same time that um that people didn't deserve to feel this way over a virus. And I had already been pretty like open and vulnerable in a lot of my writing. Like my Instagram at the time was just very centered around sensuality, which is still a focus of mine. So I knew that, you know, anything I went through would eventually make its way out into my writing or in some kind of communication. So that might have been part of why I was like, you know, eventually I'll probably talk about this.
Mhm.
But when when I first posted about it on my Instagram, as I moved into TikTok later, I was terrified. Like I had a panic attack the day I posted it. I had no idea what was going to happen. And then, you know, at least on Instagram initially, I got so much support. And I
Mhm.
had people come out of the woodworks who had it too, or who knew people who had it, who felt so like relieved and seen hearing me state it, because often people who shared it with me, like besides partners, had never shared it with anybody else. So it was like a huge weight lifted off their shoulders.
Mhm.
And then I was like, okay, like there's really a need for people to talk about this. And there's so many people dealing with this or who have this that we don't know about. So it just kind of went from there. And then my first couple TikToks that I actually made about it sort of went under the radar. I was like, okay, I got away with it. nobody,
Yeah, I know.
nobody picked up on it. And then when the first one went viral, that's when I was like, okay, there's a lot to talk about here.
Are there
Yeah.
very many people doing this on TikTok and Instagram?
You know what? There is quite a few, and I
Okay.
think they're growing in number. Before I was public about it, I do remember actually finding like a couple people. Herpes Goddess is one of them. Shayna Singleton is her name. She's really
Okay.
good. Um, she and her partner Amber, they own Herpes Could Never, which is like they have a whole like organization around like equipping people with herpes knowledge and confidence. So I remember coming across Shayna early on. And I think like maybe a lot of people even who come across my content, I was so afraid to even like follow, like, or interact with the content because I was like, I don't want anyone to even like see me in a
Yeah.
comment section, you know? So I was aware that there were people out there talking about it, but I also kind of put it out of my mind because you go through these things where like sometimes you just want to pretend you don't have it or you don't want to think about it, you know, and then I would come back to it. And then slowly over time, the desire or knowing that I would talk about it in my own way someday just kept building. So
Yeah, you've been pretty upfront. You even talk about how it happened and everything. I've been really surprised how detailed you've got. Not surprised, but pleased, I suppose.
So, yeah, I think there's so many misconceptions actually around how people get herpes and STIs in general. And I think we all like have been guilty at some point in time, whether consciously or unconsciously, of kind of thinking that like only like certain types of people get STIs or like
Mm-hmm.
you must have like done XYZ to get an STI, like whether it's like sleeping around or being quote unquote irresponsible or like not using protection, like all kinds of things. So even just like not vetting your partners enough, like people will come at you for well, you should have like tested between each partner. You should have tested your partner. You should have done
Yeah.
ABC. And the thing is, like, the reality just isn't that simple or black
It
and white.
isn't.
Like, there's incubation times. You can still get things with protection. You can get things through other means. And with herpes, you can get it non-sexually. Like, there's
Yeah.
so many ways you get herpes. And so I felt like telling my story and how I got it helped humanize it a little bit, because the trolls just think that like I'm a, S word, W. I don't know if we can say those words, but like a lot of
You can
slurs.
say whatever you want. It's 18 and
Yeah,
over.
they basically just think I got it because I'm a quote unquote whore.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, okay, well, I actually wish I had more fun in my 20s and slept around, but I spent most of my adulthood married. So I don't fit the box of what they think I am. But even if you are someone who's had a lot of partners, there's nothing wrong with that. And that doesn't make you more like, yes, like with more partners, I guess there's like a higher risk of contracting something, but you can have one partner and contract something all the same. It doesn't make a difference,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also like your content is so like liberated, like feminine, just empowered. And all of those things that I think rile the trolls up a little bit. So it's kind of like, wow, not only is this woman like accepting the fact that, like she's a sexual being, but she also is being open and honest about having something that we would prefer stays like stigmatized, right? So I'm like, you are doing amazing work, but I don't know how you do it with all of the hate that I see you getting. So sending love your way to hopefully like even it out a little bit, and hopefully this interview as well will show people like, all these things you've mentioned where it's like like the 4-month gestation period. That's the wrong word. I'm like missing the word now.
Incubation?
Incubation, not gestation. Come on.
They're related.
They're related.
I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we're going to talk more about that. But like, let's start with testing, right? So I've personally had this conversation with so many people where they're like, I'm clean. I got tested for everything last year. And it's like, could you maybe explain why this is inaccurate, or maybe like not the best way to make sure that you're whatever that means to be clean? You can also talk about that.
This was
that
new to
term
me.
as well.
Claire is the one who actually educated me about it as well.
Yeah.
But it's going to be new to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. That is, I think, the biggest like, oh my God moment. Like for me, when I was doing research, because I was just like, how are we not told this or know this? But I also kind of understand now where they're coming from. But the bottom line is that we are not screened for herpes in routine STI testing. If anyone is, it's an exception to the rule, but like generally doctors, anyone, any clinics, sex clinics do not screen you for herpes. And they don't tell you that they're not screening you for herpes either. So most people just go for a routine STI test. They say, test me for everything, which I have literally said myself every single time. I'm just like, test me for everything. It just feels like the obvious thing. And you're like, they're going to test for everything, right? But they actually only really test for a handful of things that can cause like health issues if they're untreated, right? So a lot of the STIs they test for, even something like chlamydia that we as a society are like, oh, no big deal, you got chlamydia, which is another point, like as a side note, like we will brush off things that are curable or temporary or easily treated when in the same right, you could have just as easily gotten anything else that isn't, right? Like, so in the same event, I could have contracted chlamydia or herpes, but I would have been treated totally differently having gotten chlamydia, but getting herpes. It's like, oh, I especially did something wrong, but the event was the same, right? So it's like this weird cognitive thing we do. But back to the point, it's just like, it's just the STIs that later down the road can cause health issues. So that's one thing, is herpes doesn't typically cause any health issues for the regular healthy adult. You know, for a newborn baby potentially, or someone who's immunocompromised, but for most adults, it's not going to harm your health. So if it goes untreated or unnoticed, it's not like it's going to do anything to you, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's one reason they don't include it in testing. And then another reason, and so this is like all backed up by the CDC and WHO. Like if you look into why herpes isn't screened for, all these medical bodies like recommend against it. And one of the other reasons they state is that with asymptomatic diagnosis, so if someone walks in who has no symptoms, no awareness that they have herpes, and then they find out they have it, they've been like, they've understood or come to see that it doesn't make a difference with spread and transmission. So like if asymptomatic people know, it doesn't change anything anyways. Which is
because they won't change their behavior, modify
they won't change their behavior. And the thing is, you can't really change your behavior. Like when it's asymptomatic, you don't know like when you're contagious, you don't know where you have it. There's nothing you can really do, right? If you know that you get like herpes outbreaks, let's say on your lips, you know not to kiss someone when you have a flare up, you know to avoid contact. Even sometimes you can just like feel something coming on and you can avoid activity. That's when you're most contagious, right? But outside of that, you could still be shedding asymptomatically at random periods. And you don't know when that happens. So someone who's asymptomatic could be shedding sometimes with no symptoms. Like there's nothing they can do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so one of the other reasons they don't screen is because of the mental harm. So they literally acknowledge that it causes more anxiety and like stress than the virus itself does. And it's kind of controversial because I myself have been like, well, if they just tested all of us and showed us that most of us have herpes, it would immediately destigmatize it, right? And then there's the thing of like, shouldn't asymptomatic people still know so that they can inform partners? But if there's nothing that really changes about your etiquette or approach sexually, then it is kind of like, what's the point, you know?
Well, I was looking at these papers because I had my test done 2 months ago, I think. And because of Claire educating me about all of this, when I looked at the order form, I actually said, oh, I wanted to get tested for herpes too. That's not on here. And the doctor was completely talking me out of it. Just like, oh, no, we don't normally do that. You don't need it. Everybody has it. So, and which is actually what she said, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
She said, we don't test because most people have it. I was pretty determined. However, I actually am not insured. And so I paid for all of the other tests out of pocket and they couldn't tell me how much it was going to be. So I was a little stressed about that. And then knowing that now this is going to be an extra cost, more expensive because it's not a test that they normally do. So I was like, well, I'm just going to come back and do it another time, which I haven't, to be honest, but maybe I will. But then I spoke to my partner and I just, when I got the call saying that the test came back negative, I had mentioned it to him because he was there and he goes, oh, that's great. And I said, well, yeah, except for herpes, because I wasn't able to get the herpes test. And he said, why? And I, explained to him and he's like, well, I did. And he showed me his papers and it was on there that when he had gotten his test just a couple of weeks ago, that they had ordered it.
Wow.
So I have no idea what's going on with that.
Yeah.
But he said,
yeah, so there'll be the odd doctor who will do it.
I guess so.
But like the norm is not to, because they'll follow what the general medical community approach to it is. And the other thing about the blood test specifically is like it measures your antibody levels. So like in response to a virus or contagion, like your body builds up antibodies to fight it, right? So it's not even testing for the presence of the virus itself. It's testing for your antibody levels in response to it. So it's going to say at a certain level that you likely have it. Like if you have a high count, then they'll say, okay, you likely have HSV1 or 2. but you could have a high antibody count because you've been exposed recently, but don't have it.
Oh,
Or you could
wow.
have a low antibody count, even though you have it, because you just haven't had an outbreak in a long time or ever.
Wow.
So I know it's like a mind meld, but like
I know.
that's what makes it
That's
so
what I'm experiencing
confusing.
right now. Just like mind blown.
Yeah.
Completely.
And like that's also a reason they won't do it, because the blood test isn't that reliable, because it creates a lot of false negatives and positives, right? And then there is the incubation time. Some people will go get tested like a couple weeks after they had an interaction with someone who maybe they know has it. But it can take your body like weeks to months to actually build up enough antibodies to show up on the test.
If you, and you don't have to answer this, we can take it out if you want. But when you went to get tested, were you just going for a routine checkup?
No, because what they'll fall back on and what they find the most conclusive is a swab, right? So a culture swab. That's what actually tells you, like, okay, the virus is present. This is the one you have. But they need something to swab. Like if you have nothing on your skin, there's nothing to swab, right? So I went because after like a few days after my interaction with my partner at the time, I developed what I thought was like a razor bump. And I kind of just was like, it's just a razor bump, that's it. But over time, it started to hurt more. And then I noticed it blister. And that was when I had the alarm. Like for me, like I was like, okay, a blister is not normal for that area. So, I mean, I guess it can happen for other reasons, but I don't know. I couldn't think of a reason why I'd have a blister there. And so I went to get a swab, and then that's how they confirmed it for me that it was HSV2. So,
well, let's, as far as HBS2 and HBS1 go, this leads in really well to the next question of why are the terms genital herpes and oral herpes misleading?
right. So HSV stands for herpes simplex virus. That's the one that we generally refer to when we think herpes, right? But there are like 8 common strains that humans have. Like mono is a strain of herpes, shingles is a strain of herpes. There's a few others that we just don't hear about as much, but there's actually like hundreds of herpes strains, and there's like different herpes strains for different living creatures and species. Like it's such a common virus.
Yeah.
And with herpes simplex, like from what I've been like diving into this more and more recently, because I'm trying to understand why we even differentiated between type 1 and 2 in the first place.
Right.
Because like type 1 was always around. And at some point, from what I read recently, it was like around the 60s that doctors started to identify type 2. So they would be like, we're seeing herpes genitally, we're going to call it type 2, right? And it did sort of mutate in the sense that it does prefer the genital area, like type 2 does. But type 1 is happy with both. Like I kind of describe it as like type 1 likes to travel like north and south, like it's happy being in both places, but type 2 likes to stay in the south, like in the tropics.
Yeah.
Tropics.
Which is what makes those terms like so misleading, is that like such a high percentage of the population has oral herpes or cold sores, right?
Yeah.
And yet you can have it in your genital area as well, which is the super stigmatized like version.
Yeah.
And yet it's like so twisted because it's the virus that everyone has and isn't as stigmatized. It's
for
just,
sure, because most people, like almost all of us, I'd be willing to say practically all of us have HSV1. And whether you right?
yeah,
And like only and the same goes for HSV2, is only a small percentage ever have symptoms. So like of those of us who get cold sores or who get genital herpes outbreaks, we're in like the 10 to 20%, because most people never do. They actually did a study on like cadavers, like people who passed away, and they found that I think it was like the majority of them had herpes and never knew.
Huh.
So
Wow.
it's something that practically all of us have. And with cold sores, I think partially like because we call them cold sores, we just don't associate it with herpes. Like
Yeah.
the first mental block is most people don't realize it is herpes. Like they'll deny that. And you know, a lot of people think it's just like something that happens when they're run down. And it's like, yeah, that's true because the virus is being triggered when you're run down, just like it happens if you have it genitally. But what's so interesting is like we generally won't seek to find out if we have oral herpes. We generally won't disclose that to a partner. But when it's genital, it's a completely different set of pressures and expectations and desires. And it's only because we're like alarmed at its location, you know? But having oral herpes, like we can transmit to partners' genitals all the same via oral sex, whether we're having a flare up or not. Because people also think, okay, well, cold sores are different because it's only contagious when I have one, but that's not true, right?
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting. And I think because type 2 is more often associated with genital herpes, people just say, like, well, type 1 is the good one, type 2 is the bad one. But for someone that has type 1 genitally, it's not going to make a difference. And it's almost, I think it's like half or more of genital herpes is HSV1.
Wow.
So it's, I would argue it's probably the more common genital herpes strain now. And always has been. I mean, you can find articles from decades ago talking about how common like HSV1 is genitally because of oral sex. We've always had oral sex. It's nothing new, right?
And what was it? So now I'm getting really interested because I'm kind of a history nerd. And have you been able to figure out or pinpoint, you know, when and how it did get to the point where it is so stigmatized? Or was it always?
Pinpointing it is difficult, but there's definitely a few cultural instances that you can find when you search online that get cited. So one of them is like it was written about in Shakespeare. There was like a line in one of Shakespeare's writings about like blisters on a lip or something.
Nice.
Okay. All right. We're going back a little while.
Yeah. Even before that, there was some kind of like, I read it recently. I wish I could remember who it was. It was some kind of royal where they were like, you're not allowed to kiss people anymore or something like that. Or like they banned someone from kissing people because of oral herpes.
Oh, wow. How interesting.
And then, but those are all more in reference to like oral. I know that at some point I remember reading that genital herpes for a time was just like normal. Like it was like people were like, oh yeah, like they just didn't regard it as a disease or issue. So it's really interesting because with each generation, I think we re-stigmatize it in ways that appeal to like our society or benefit our society's purist conservative views, right? Like it's like there's an article as well from the 80s in Times Magazine. This is actually probably one of the major like milestones, I would say. And Ella Dawson, who was one of the first herpes advocates I was aware of, she did a whole article about this. But Times Magazine in the 80s published this like cover article, and it was called the Scarlet Letter, or like the new Scarlet Letter. It was like this bloody horror movie style type over the cover, and it said herpes. The whole article is basically about how the sexual revolution through the 70s created this like blight of herpes, like from people being irresponsible. And it was in kind of the late 80s and 90s that, at least in the West, like things got really conservative. Like they cracked down on a lot of things. I think it was like in Reagan's time. You know, abstinence education became a thing, like religious conservatism kind of took hold. So it makes sense. Like it's interesting that after the sexual revolution, they're like, oh, we created this epidemic of herpes, right?
To scare people.
So that's one thing. And then some people attribute it to the drug being promoted, like the antivirals. But, The ads for the antivirals were kind of focused, from what I understood, on like, if herpes is debilitating your love life, like here's a solution, right?
Mhm.
But it is a double-edged sword because it's saying like, if you have herpes, it debilitates your love
Yeah.
life, but that's not true.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. There's a lot there.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, just to add more complication to dating, right? So, I actually only found out about this whole world, and I, I think I had a pretty progressive education and like open upbringing where like I could ask about things like this if I needed to. Like I was educated on these subjects. I thought, unlike I think a lot of people in the United States where, sex ed is really, really lacking. I thought I had a really good start in this, but I had no idea about this until actually, like someone I went on a date with disclosed this to me, and I started researching, and I'm like, he was just like, do your own research, it's your choice. And, said the thing that I think so many people I've heard used to talk about, where it's like, I didn't have a choice. So I just want to make sure that I always let people know so that they can make their own decisions. And that was when I was like, oh, well, I think I've been tested for this. And I went through my files and was like, oh my God, I've never been tested for it. And so, that conversation, I was just like so appreciative of. How do you suggest people talk to potential partners about this part of sexual health? Like, because I know it can be so awkward for some people to even like broach the subject. So, what do you suggest?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's something that I think obviously at first is probably the biggest like gripe for people, or challenge that they, have trouble getting over, is disclosing to partners, how they're going to disclose, how their partners are going to react. And I understand it can be really scary and emotional because we don't feel great about rejection. And it just, for us, invites a reason to be rejected off the bat and like not given a chance. But I often tell people to firstly think about like all the times or reasons you've been rejected outside of herpes, because we've all had some kind of rejection, or even just like had things not work out, or we've rejected partners for things that had nothing to do with that. So getting comfortable with that is important. And then also not expecting that that's going to be the outcome every time we disclose, because people walk into it thinking like, why would anyone take the risk? Why would anyone want to date me? They're obviously going to say no. And then a lot of them don't bother trying. Like, I think the most heartbreaking thing to me is people who hold themselves back for years or even forever from dating because they like remove themselves from the dating world. Like they're like, I'm not, viable. Like I'm not worthy of anyone dating me, that's the most heartbreaking thing to me. So firstly, like, again, just bringing it back to oral herpes and cold sores, we don't even discuss that, right? We
Mhm.
don't think like, what if this partner has cold sores? Should I be with this person? Do I want to take the risk? Because like, we're going to take the risk every time we kiss, every time we engage in oral sex.
Mm.
And and that's a bigger question about like, either we all disclose or none of us disclose, right? I still disclose personally because I agree it's the moral and ethical thing to do. People will try to scare you that it's like illegal not to. And I agree it's the moral thing to do, but you're not going to go to jail. Like
Yeah.
it's not like that. But giving someone the choice is a wonderful thing to do. And the silver lining of it is it just encourages you to engage in like a sexual health conversation, which we want to have anyway. Like we want to be comfortable having that with our partners anyway. I think that a lot of us want to like avoid it or just work past it or forget about it because we were like worried about that. We don't want to talk about that. We kind of don't want to know. Like a lot of people just want to go into things with bliss, like ignorance is bliss kind of mentality.
Yeah, sadly, no one wants to actually use the words, which I work with my clients on, just, make it sexy, and helping them like get the wording right. But people, don't even want to just say it.
For sure. And it's even just like, so when disclosing yourself, I just keep it really light. Like, I think one of the things that people can do if they're still in a very difficult place about their herpes that can hurt their situation is they'll be really self-deprecating and negative about it. So like people might approach a partner and be like, I have this thing to tell you, or we need to talk. Like, I have an issue. Like, I understand if you don't want to date me or if you never want to talk to me again. Like, like setting it up like that is not gonna help because most people don't understand much about herpes, right?
Yeah.
So if you come to them with this really negative, somber outlook,
like
that's just going to scare them. Yeah. And you're not being dishonest by playing it down. You're actually being more honest by playing it down, because the reality is, at the end of the day, it is just a skin issue that we have stigmatized, like very much so. Right. So I kind of just approach it like, hey, I just want to let you know, or I like to let my partners know I have herpes. Let me know if you have any questions about that. Like, there's precautions we can take. Like, I just kind of start out like short and sweet. And then I just sort of gauge based on the person's response. Some people want to know more and they ask questions, then you can share some things. Sometimes I hesitate to tell people to do their own research because you can find sources and websites that are very stigmatizing.
Or this MTV thing that came up, which was one of the worst things I've ever seen. That was so shocking. But I guess maybe you could come across that. I don't know what happens when you Google.
There's so many like disparaging herpes jokes across our media all the time. It's such an odd, even on the Bachelor series, like Bachelor, Bachelorette, because I did a herpes in the media series on my TikTok for a bit. And the Bachelor franchise has come up like 3 or 4 times, like in separate clips where they've been like, well, at least I don't have herpes or something like that.
Oh my God. What the hell?
It's interesting.
That is so not okay.
It's interesting because my theory is that there was a book written like about behind the scenes with like how they accept applicants, or it was behind the scenes of like the whole show production. And this person said that they test all their contestants and that they also test them for herpes. That was like specifically mentioned. And that if they test positive for anything, they're not allowed on the show. So I think like herpes is maybe top of mind for all these Bachelor, Bachelorette contestants, because they learn that like, I don't know, that's part of their testing. And they're like, well, I'm on Bachelor, so I'm clean.
Well, they must, a lot of them would just be learning this for the first time because there is such a lack of awareness around herpes testing.
Absolutely.
Myself,
and
being a good example.
I'm really curious if they extend it to oral herpes, because I've heard more than a few people tell me that they got the test for both strains, tested positive for HSV1, but then were told that they tested negative for herpes. So it's like, they're like, HSV1 doesn't count. So I'm very curious if the Bachelor franchise includes HSV1, because that would be most people.
Yeah, it'd be hard to find people for the show. And there's been so many seasons. So you're running out of people.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Suze, do you think that it is a good time to disclose this to new partners or potential partners, or where in the timeline of romance do you think this should come out?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think like I tell people that it's definitely often like it comes down to personal preference and comfort, because, we're all different. We all have different communication styles. Like some of us prefer even just like the way to do it, right? Like prefer to do it through text or prefer to do it on the phone or in person. And in terms of timing, some people want to go on a few dates and get to know a person first, or let them get to know you. Some people want to do it right away just to get a good sense. I like to do it pretty quick because for me, it just reveals someone's character. It's like, I always talk about it being such a great filter, Because if someone is going to react rudely, which never act like that has never happened to me in disclosing that someone was actually rude.
Oh,
Like that only happens on like that's only trolls who I'm not actually dating who react that way online.
gotcha.
People that are
Keyboard
actual
warriors.
dating prospects for me have never been rude. I think the worst I've ever had is someone unmatched like right after.
Yeah.
Which I just found rude because it's like, I don't know, just have the balls to be like, okay, like not for me or something, right?
Mhm.
But most of the time people are like really thankful for the honesty. They want to know more, or they think about it and come back, or they're like, that's great, I don't care, you know.
Yeah.
But I just think it reveals so much, because if someone's like inquisitive, I love that. Often I've had people be like, oh yeah, like herpes is super common, like I know this person who has it, like no problem. So I just like to do it early personally, because I love seeing how they react, and it gives me a sense. Because if they're going to be disrespectful, ignorant, or like have no idea what herpes is, I'm, whether it's for something casual or not, I don't really want to like engage
Yeah.
with someone who's that unaware or ignorant, you know?
Yeah.
I'm surprised at the disparity of what we're seeing as something that's so hugely stigmatized, and then your experience with people being so chill about it. What do you think that's about?
I don't know. I think when people are faced with someone who directly tells them, there's like more humanity that comes into play. You know what I mean? Like you're, and I've thought about that before, because I'm like, would they be the type of person to say something stupid online, but then because they're talking to me one on one, they're being respectful? You know, like what's the authentic side?
Mhm.
But it really does humanize things to hear from and speak to someone who has it that you're interested in, right?
Mhm.
Whereas online, like what we mentioned earlier, I honestly think that a lot of the negative reaction that comes mostly from men for me is about being a woman, like who's confident and passionate and in her sexual energy. They don't like that. So
Yeah.
herpes is like an easy target for them. But
Mhm.
if they were actually, if they ever had a chance and they were in my DMs, I don't think they would be saying the shit they say. And I've
Yeah.
had some trolls. Honestly, the only like attractive trolls I've ever had, because I often go look at what they look like. I can't with all of them. There's too many. But I've had the odd one where I was like, oh, he was cute. Like, that's too bad.
Mhm.
Um, I think I did a video response to one of them, and he like wrote me after and was like super sorry, and then like still trying to like slide in the DMs, you know? And I was like, no,
Thanks, no
no.
thanks.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
already showed your true colors. Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So just to maybe put some people's minds at ease, what are a couple guidelines, or how have you navigated actually having a sexual relationship with people after disclosing?
Yeah. So basically, like, you know, the disclosing is so that you can cover any bases around the elements you can't control, right? Which again, like any partner that any of us engage in, is arguably an equivalent risk, if not a greater one. Cause like someone who knows they have it can sort of like at least avoid activity when we know we're most contagious. But the average person walking around who doesn't know their status or doesn't recognize symptoms is like an equal risk, right? So, one thing that helps you as the person who's like herpes positive is remembering you're not this like red herring. You're not like the major risk in the situation. Like, you also want to know about your partner. Everyone is a risk. Like, herpes is like a part of human life. Like, really, that's how I think we should think about it. Like, I know it can seem scary because it's like you don't want blisters anywhere in a sensitive area or whatever, but like I'm kind of getting off track, but like it might not even be blisters. It might be like one little bump or nothing, or something that looks like a cut, you know?
Yeah.
um, the inconvenience of the actual virus is so small compared to the stigma. So after disclosing, you're just kind of covering the bases of, if you were ever shedding without your knowledge, like they're aware. But what's really interesting is with shedding, I read this recently, but like the viral load is lower when you're shedding asymptomatically.
And shedding means you have symptoms?
Shedding means like the virus is activating.
Active. Okay.
But you might not have any symptoms.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of, you can think of it like they talked about it a lot with COVID, because like you could have COVID asymptomatically, right? Like you don't know you have COVID, but the virus is still replicating and shedding. So you could still transmit it to someone. So it works the same way with any virus, right? So herpes can suddenly activate, and the shedding happens like it could be, they don't know exactly because it varies person to person, but the general idea is like anywhere from 5 to 20% of the time, which is like fairly small. So it could be like a random day in a month that you're shedding. You might be shedding for like a few minutes or a few seconds, and the viral load when you're shedding is lower. So something interesting I heard someone recently say is your partner, if they're like, unless they're kind of immunocompromised in that moment, like let's say they're run down or like hungover, I don't know. Like if they're in a healthy state, the viral load might not be enough to affect them at all. So it's kind of a detailed side note, but people just kind of assume like, because you're with someone who has herpes, you're like really taking a risk every time, but we're not contagious most of the time, right? And when we're shedding, there's a small chance. So the disclosing covers that. When it comes to actual precautions, it's really just like avoiding activity if you feel a flare up coming on. And some people don't. Like it's between you and your partner to decide what you're comfortable with. There's people who are just like, okay, whatever. If I get it, I get it, I wouldn't personally be comfortable engaging in anything, but I mean, you could work around it depending on where you have it.
Yeah.
Like if you're having a flare up genitally, which by the way, genital could mean like it's on your hips or on your butt or on your thighs. Like it doesn't mean it's exactly on your genitals. So if you're having a flare up down there, your mouth is fair game, so you can work around it even if you're having a flare up. And then, so yeah, avoiding activity during a flare up or if you feel a flare up coming on. And then precautions are also up to you and your partner. So it's not like you have to use condoms for the rest of your life or dental dams. You can literally choose what you and your partner are comfortable doing and go about it that way. So I think that's why it's just good to have that conversation and see where the comfort level is. But there's also just little things like with genital herpes, it's pretty rare for it to transmit to someone orally. Like it doesn't typically go from genitals to mouth. It can, but especially with type 2, it likes to stay below, right? What's way more common is from mouth to genitals. So like for me, receiving oral sex, I don't worry about that much because type 2 is really rarely going to transmit to my partner's mouth, right? So there's some little things like that that help to know. People with vulvas are twice as likely to get it, unfortunately. But if you're someone with a vulva dating someone with a penis, they're less likely to contract it from you. That's a little bit of a bonus.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of little nuances to it, but generally nothing changes. You don't do things differently except for avoiding activity if you have a flare up.
Gotcha. What can you tell us about your work as a sensual guide, and has all of your education around herpes come into play or affected your role as a sensual guide at all?
Yeah, so I got into sensuality like years ago. So it was after in like 2017, I was with my ex partner at the time, not the one I got it from, but my ex husband. And I had gone through a miscarriage and like a lot of things in my life. And I kind of like suddenly started to just feel this desire to like love and embrace my body and sexuality like never before. um, I think that going through a pregnancy and losing a pregnancy and then recovering from that almost
Yeah.
like awoke something in my body. Like I was so grateful for my body and like what it went through and how it healed. And I don't know if like I'm sure with like a full pregnancy and then delivery, maybe people go through this to a degree too. Like you just have this reverence for how powerful and amazing your body is. And so that kind of sparked something in me where I just started to like unapologetically love myself more than ever before. Like I took photos of myself, I would film videos of myself, I would play dress up and explore like my style. And I was always like so concerned about what people thought, like very much just like going by, I don't know, like just what people expected me to dress like or look like or how they expected me to carry myself. And I thought when I started to break out of that and like express myself sensually that that was controversial. Because even then I remember having some people who kind of didn't understand what I was doing and felt a little bit like threatened by it. And once once I got herpes, like I realized being public about that was a whole other level of controversy. But it relates to sensuality in like such an amazing way. Because, you know, our understanding of sensuality is kind of just like sexual expression, right? Having this like sensual energy and vibe and like way of interacting with people. And at the baseline, sensuality is actually kind of like, I see it as like a mindfulness practice because it's about like fulfilling and like pleasing your senses, your physical senses. And when you're doing that, you're just really catering to like your physical existence. Like you're just like feeding yourself all these things that are pleasing to you, figuring more out about who you are and what you desire and what you love. And then the sort of next level to sensuality to me is awakening that kind of sexual energy and confidence and self-worth. And that is the number, like that's the thing that's hit the hardest when you get a herpes or any STI diagnosis is connecting to that sexual energy, the self-worth, the self-confidence. So like tapping into those sensual tools and practices has become more important and fulfilling than ever with like a herpes diagnosis, and is kind of how I try to help other people with theirs, you know? So it's come full circle in a really unexpected way.
Yeah, being present in your body instead of like shutting it off and like hating it for it's like, you know, being betrayed by herpes. But
Totally. Yeah.
yeah, instead of being like, no, still sexy, still here.
Definitely.
Still
In
can
fact, that's
enjoy
why
life.
the MTV troll picked you up, is because you were doing a sexy video saying that you have herpes, but you're still sexy, right?
Literally. Yeah. So
that was what you said.
Rob Deerdeck, who is a host of the show MTV Ridiculousness, so they featured a clip of mine saying that was one of my more viral videos that, you know, made a lot of trolls angry. And all I said in it was like, I'm hot and I have herpes. And you're right. He was like, and you're a super spreader. That's what he said, which is basically insinuating that because I'm sexy or like know that I'm sexy, I must have a lot of partners and I must be spreading it to all my partners. Like it's slut shaming, right? That's essentially what he did. And that was crazy. That was crazy. Like I knew that show was gonna I knew they were gonna say something stupid and like roast me. And I was ready for that because I agreed to have my clip featured to get exposure. Yeah, I knew like because they approached me, they'll usually approach you if you have a viral video that they want to feature. And so I knew, and people kind of in response are like, well, you knew what you were doing. Like, why are you complaining now? But it's so far beyond like a simple roast to call someone a super spreader.
Agreed.
And my intention was just to get out in front of people beyond social media who would have seen that video despite whatever commentary they made, and would have benefited from seeing someone declare in an unbothered way that they have herpes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like I guess it's kind of an interesting like social experiment to see played out because we're seeing, you know, um having an audience to an interaction of like slut shaming that would typically not be so public, and we're kind of getting to see like, oh wow, this is what a man who feels threatened and whose job is, to roast people, this is like what he goes for as an insult.
Yeah,
And that tells us a lot about like what, other insecure men probably would be
absolutely.
saying.
And the irony is that, like, statistically, so there's 3 hosts on that show. There's Chanel West Coast and Steele O'Brim. So the 3 of them are the 3 main like hosts. And statistically, 2 out of 3 people have HSV1. So I was like,
Right.
2 out of those 3 people have herpes. And sure enough, like, I can't confirm this, but my video talking about the experience got a lot of traction, and there was people in the comments like over and over again stating that they've seen Chanel and Rob with cold sores. So I was like, 2 out of 3 of them do have herpes and they have no idea.
Booyah.
And then on top of it, Rob Deerdeck has, I think in LA, or maybe it's California, maybe just LA, he has a Rob Deerdeck Day. And it stands for, it's like an acronym from his name, but it's like, did you do something kind today or something like that? Like, it's literally a day dedicated to acts of kindness inspired by him. And I'm just like, what?
Okay.
What? Oh man. Ugh. Well, moving on. Here at X Files, we end up talking a lot about breakups and divorce, and your story does involve divorce. Would you like to talk about it, or do you have any advice for our listeners based on what you learned during that experience of coming back from divorce and healing emotionally?
Yeah. I will say, just like, because my divorce was like where I believe I contracted herpes was a relationship after my divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but it was all kind of connected because it was just like a very difficult time in my life. And um, I mean, I had a great relationship with my ex-husband, and our divorce was very amicable. We're friends to this day. We have a lot of shared interests, and I mean, like, we still share a dog and a business. So
Yeah.
my experience with my divorce was it was painful coming to a realization that it wasn't what made me happy anymore, and dealing with sort of my family's and like relatives' reaction around it. Um, but I think it was, and it was like scary to kind of like take down all these things that were identifiers for me of who I was. Like, I was married, I lived in this place, so we had a dog, we had a business, and all of a sudden all of that was going to change. So it was such a destabilizing moment, but it was kind of in the aftermath of that I met my next partner, who I, just I was really like in need of someone to validate my self-worth. I was craving a passion I hadn't felt for a long time in my relationship, and that new relationship delivered all of that, but it was also not a healthy relationship. I was cheated on in that relationship. I discovered it all after. I believe he was dishonest about having herpes, but I don't have proof of that. But what I've learned from that, because I really took probably 2 years to really heal and recover from that relationship. And I've learned so much from that like that's pouring into a book I'm writing. It's like about herpes and sensuality and coming out of these relationships. But
Awesome.
Something I really learned was just how crucial and incredible and important it is to love ourselves, like, and not look for a partner to do that, you know, because that can also put us in positions where we accept someone who can harm us, and who can provide all those things for us with a consequence or in an inauthentic way, or to kind of get what they want. Um, but the healing journey from that was so beautiful because, like, for the first time in my life, I really embraced myself more than I ever have. So being single, coming out of that, even with herpes, has been like the most blessed, like inspiring time in my life. And, you know, I don't even have animosity about getting herpes from that relationship. There's the dishonesty is a bit problematic if that was the case. It was more about being cheated on, but I also learned so much about being cheated on too, because it also comes back to self-worth, and we never deserve that from any partner. You know, we've never done anything wrong to get cheated on. Like,
Yeah.
you can't do anything to prevent that. You know, it doesn't matter if you're I think it was like Emily Ratajkowski. I can't remember how to say her name, that supermodel.
Yeah. Like
She was like
Ratatowski
cheated
or
on,
something.
and the media was all like, how, like, if she got cheated on, it's over for all of us, you know? But it's like,
Yeah.
it's not about
How
your
hot you
appearance.
are
No.
or how nice you are to your partner.
Right.
It's just
Exactly.
some people.
Yeah, it's actually a very sexist thing to say, if you ask me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Claire,
Well,
do you have
thank
any other
you.
questions?
No, I mean, I could sit here all day and keep talking. You're such a good speaker. So I'm so glad we got to have you on the podcast. What about you, Janice? Do you have
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, I just have one more to that I thought would be a good way to tie things up. And that is, what do you think is the number one thing our listeners can do to be part of the destigmatization around herpes?
I love that question. I think not engaging in herpes jokes and slander is a big one.
Yeah.
It hurts a lot of people. I mean, I remember being young in high school and not knowing better and saying things like that, like, oh, that person probably has herpes. You know, it's like, you probably, like, you most definitely have people in your circle who have it and you just don't know. And they're like suffering silently when they hear you say those things. So it's not about beating yourself up for it, but just doing better. And then, yeah, just taking the time to listen and educate yourself around what herpes is, how it actually works. I mean, it doesn't hurt and is probably helpful, being any sexually active adult or adult period, to just have a good understanding of sexual health and STIs, because a lot of our stigma comes from fear. You know, we're all just like, we're afraid of these things. But the more you learn about it, the more you really realize that, you know, we're so lucky to be in a time where all these things are treatable, they're all manageable. Something like HIV that was so stigmatized and still is today, but like to a lesser degree than it used to be, is, you know, even less transmittable. Like on medication, it's completely undetectable, untransmittable, right?
Yeah.
So we've made like amazing strides, and like, education or knowledge is power, right? This is the saying. So just knowing a lot more about sexual health is going to like equip you to feel better and more comfortable in your in your relationships with your partners, and then be less stigmatizing in general, towards people who have STIs. And most of us will acquire an STI at some point. It's not like a scary doom thing. It's just a fact of being a human.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we're all gonna get cold and sick. Like, we're all gonna get colds and flus and things from being around each other. Like, obviously with sex and sexual contact or close contact, there's things we'll acquire too. And it's okay. There's support out there. So
It's amazing. That's beautiful. Thank you. And I think this is going to be, I mean, I've been asking for this episode for a while. We've been like, we will do it. We will do
Yes.
it. We just have to find the right the right person, and we did. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can everyone find you and possibly work with you for the sensuality or anything else? And I'm so excited for your book to come out. I will definitely be getting a copy. So
Thank you so much. That's so sweet. I'm most active on TikTok and Instagram. So TikTok is just my username is Suzebub. And then Instagram, it's the same thing with an S at the end, Suzebubs. And my website, suzebub.com, has all the ways you can reach me and also just information on my like different services I have. So I have a Sensuality 1.0 series that you can do, a Sensuality 2.0. 1.0 is like the more mindfulness approach to sensuality. 2.0 is like that sexual energy. And then I even have I call it like a love rash. Like when I refer to herpes in that context, I call it a love rash, not because it's like comes from love making necessarily or what, but because it's about self-love and all that to me. So it's just like, let's call it something else and see. But I have a love rash series as well. That's about like utilizing sensual practices to help you accept your herpes diagnosis and also just regain confidence and that sexual prowess. So it's all on there.
Oh, that's fantastic. What an amazing service to offer people, because I guess, regaining your confidence would be a big thing afterwards. So I think that that's invaluable. And I also think Claire's absolutely right. We definitely found the right person to talk to our audience about this. So thank you for your time and thank you for everything that you're doing. It's so important and so needed these days.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a great combo.
Thank you. Well, thanks to everyone for tuning in. We will see you next Tuesday. And in the meantime, good luck out there. Bye. Bye.
yay.
Thank you for listening to X-Files podcast. I sincerely hope that you found today's episode inspirational or useful. I would love to support you on your healing journey. All you have to do is send me a message through the X-Files Instagram account, and I will personally be in touch to get you started. Remember, if you are struggling with a broken heart, your feelings are temporary. I am sending you so much love and luck for the week ahead. You've got this.